How's everybody tonight? Talk a little too loud. My name is Jason Wallis. I'm with an importer called Merchant de Vin. Anybody heard of the importer? Show of hands. A few of you. I've actually been here. Last time I was here, probably a little over 2 years ago, maybe close to 3. Sister Rose has always been a good supporter of Merchant de Vin and our brands. Samuel Smith Brewery, Lindemans, Ayinger Brewery. The unique thing with us is that our whole unique thing that we actually boast about with Merchant de Vin is that we're selling based on beer styles. And so with that said, we're looking for ultimately products that are reminiscent of Old World. And so in this case, we're going back and finding breweries from Europe that have styles that we can market, but in turn bring back classic brewing styles to the U.S. to more or less educate. And so it's probably about 70% of my job is education, such as this. Beer dinners, beer samplings, basically anything educated. That's really how the company was founded. Merchant de Vin is a sole importer of privately owned breweries. And so these breweries are breweries that have loads of history behind them. Today I was on the way down, driving down here, and I just started adding up the years of brewing experience that our 4 breweries that we're tasting off tonight have in total. Between Orval Brewery, which will take the new brewery, has been around since 1929. They've been brewing in that brew house. Samuel Smith Brewery, which has been around since 1758. Ayinger Brewery, which has been around since 1878. And Lindemans Brewery, that's been brewing since 1811. 684 years of brewing history. So all in different regions of either Belgium or England or Germany, creating their own beer styles, working from the styles that are emulate of what that region has been making for years. Typical example with Bavarian wheat beers, beautiful full-bodied lagers, come from Ayinger with their brewery, all the way to Samuel Smith where they're producing full-bodied ales. Lagers came a little later, ciders came a little shorter after that, and producing these beautiful full-bodied beers and in turn making beer to sell to the public. Orval, which is an actual working monastery. The monastery's been around since 1070, but like I said, the newest brewery that they had, I kind of cheated and gave you the youngest part of that one. And then with Lindemans, a unique story because we're talking about a region in Belgium that actually only incorporates 7 brewers. 7 brewers that make a style of beer called Lambic. And what makes that unique is basically the style or the style of the brewing process that they're actually skipping. So when we get to that part, we'll talk about the uniqueness of Lambic producers as well. But it all starts with Merchant de Vin. If you look on the brochure, we started in 1978. A gentleman named Charles Finkel, who was you might have heard me mention the story before. Charles Finkel was in the Washington State wine industry. And he, at that point, he wanted to import his own wineries into the United States. So he left the wine industry in Washington State, filed a licensure to import wine into the U.S., called it Merchant of Wine, Merchant du Vin, and went over basically backpacking to find wineries in France and some in Italy. But also in the turn did some traveling in England and traveling in Belgium, a little bit in Germany, and he had met a few people that impacted his life that made him change his direction of where he was going to go. So in that said, he had met the famed beer writer Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson pointed Charles in the direction of Samuel Smith Brewery. Michael Jackson, if you have know any history behind the famed beer writer, he's actually from the county of York, which is where Samuel Smith resides to this day. And so he pinpointed and pushed Charles in direction of going towards beer as opposed to wine. And so with that said, he already had the importership already set up, hence it still said Merchant of Wine, but in 1978 he imported his first case of beer, which is Samuel Smith Old Brewery Pale Ale, to the United States market. At that time when he imported this beer, he imported a 6-pack Pale Ale from Britain, 1978, that retailed for $12 a 6-pack. At that time, people thought he was crazy. He said, "What are you doing?" But what Charles had is he had a passion for marketing, and he had a great palate for beer and food combinations, beer and wine, or wine and food combinations. So with that said, he went after and he marketed basically combining food, taking the traditions of the English and how they pair their food with the beer, the Germans and how they do the same, the Belgians. It basically brought to the United States, and we talked about the beers that we brought in and talked about how they paired with food well before, this is late 70s, going into early 80s, but talking about the whole meaning behind the beer culture. It's unique for breweries such as Ayinger to where beer is culture. Beer is not just an experience by itself, it's with food. It's through the whole dining experience. And so that's how we first started out with our beers, is basically marketing them. How do you pair them with food? And from there. To this day, we started out with one brewery. We eventually grew and grew from there. And now 37 years later, we're now at 10 different breweries. We've actually had more in the portfolio, but we've actually managed what we wanted to carry. So that little brochure, this one here, this is our most recognized tool that we ever do. And so if you ever go into an account and you're looking for something and you can't find it, you know what? This is a great tool to take in and find something that you're looking for. So you had a question?
So the old brewery pale ale you brought in,
yeah.
Is that the stuff that is sold in England as Old Brewery Bitter, and do you still import that?
No. Old Brewery Bitter is actually stays native for them only. And the reason being that that's actually the number one produced beer. So for the brewery, for Samuel Smith, one thing that people aren't aware of is that the brewery it's our largest brewery. It's what started off the Merchant of Vin. But first of all, Samuel Smith is an actual working brewery that has over 200 of their own proprietary pubs. So if you're ever in England, anybody ever been to England? There you go. Been to Smith, had a pint. Old Brewery Bitters is by far the number one selling beer, number one produced beer. But because of the fact that it's not pasteurized and it's on cask condition, you can't actually get it here to the United States. So a little history with them is that the brewery is one of the only few breweries in England that still has a full-time cooper on staff. Now, if you're not familiar with the cooper is basically the gentleman that repairs the wooden vessels, or basically the storage containers or kegs, wooden kegs, so to speak. But that gentleman has been in that position for 43 years. One gentleman, all he does is repair staves in the cask every day. Smith is a very, very traditional brewery, so in that case, we more or less sell the secondary, or if you say the extra beer that they don't want to sell, or they produce for the United States. And so, but it is our number one brewery. You'll see on the brochure that we actually have 15 different styles that the brewery does. But in turn, there's so much different characteristics that come out of it. You have porters, you have stouts, you have multiple styles of stout. We're going to try one of the newer stouts tonight, which is actually our chocolate stout that's done organically. And then we have traditional porters, nut brown ale, pale ales, cider. And so out of that lineup, that's Samuel Smith. We have 4 breweries here tonight, and we can fire up the Orval if you're ready. So, oops, I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Not a problem. Not a problem. So,
Tell you guys that when we moved up here from down the street, very few people remember that. How many people went to Sisters down the street? Like 10 people? Yeah. Well, anyway, we moved up here in 97, and we decided that we were going to do this crazy beer thing that really no one was doing. There were Growlers was around at that time. There was one Growlers location, they had a lot of taps, but we decided we're going to do an unbelievable amount of bottles. And I can tell you that there was no way that we could have done it without Merchant of Vin. I mean, really, we were one of the few importers that were bringing a lot of this stuff in. And specifically, to St. Louis, we were sort of responsible for getting a lot of that stuff into this market because we were willing to buy it. And they said, we're not going to bring it in for Merchant of Vin unless you buy it all. So we're like, well, that's kind of, okay, I guess that's what we have to do, but that's what we have to do. This was in 97. So we said, if you bring it here, we'll buy all of it. And that's what we did. But this importer was definitely, really instrumental in getting this whole, scene started as far as, beer from around the world in this kind of volume to this extent. So
thank you for that. That it means a lot. I've been with the importer for 7 years.
The reason why I came to work for them is because of the reputation that we had and also the longevity of the breweries that we have, because what's in the bottle speaks volumes to us. It's classically brewed beer, but you know what? It's spot on. If you have that many years of history behind it, 250 years, Ayinger Brewery has 137 currently, but in turn they are the highest award-rated brewery that's out of Germany, out of Bavaria. And so we'll have their celebrator Dopplebock this evening. in our portfolio, we don't go out and we look for breweries that are award-winning. We just have breweries that make damn good beer. And as it happens to be, when they bring them to the United States, and we put them out in people's hands, people that will go on and put stellar scores on ratebeer.com or Beer Advocate or All About Beer, you might see where our beers pop up. And so the thing is they're well received because the thing is the quality is in the bottle. And that's really the biggest thing. The one thing that kind of scares people, though, is you will be in an account. You got thousands of beers to select from. You might see a bottle of Orval on the shelf. Retails for about $5.99, $6.50 a bottle. And you might be scared off that. You think, like, wow, that's kind of, I don't want to pay that much money for a 12-ounce bottle. I've never had it before. So things like this is key for us to actually get a chance to pour this beer for you and have you sample it. And this is actually, a rarity with our Trappist beers because we don't sample it very often. And so the thing is anymore, there's so much beer to pick from that, it's a smorgasbord. And so with our beers in general, we basically focus on the style and where the style fits and where we want to market it. We feel that to this day, Samuel Smith Oatmeal Stout is the best brewed oatmeal stout in the market. In the case of Lambics, Lindemans Lambics has been producing this beautiful fruited raspberry beer, black cherry beer, that's been around for 25 plus years. That by far it's such a unique product that it's second to none. And there's people that make Lambic style, but there's something unique about somebody that's making beer the way they are, and that's out of these producers that come from the Lambic region. So we are actually based out of Seattle, Washington. So we're based out of Seattle, and the one thing I was going to finish up with was Charles Finkel. In his tenure, he actually purchased a brewery in Seattle called Pike Brewery. Anybody ever heard of Pike Brewing? Anybody been there? So Charles Finkel owns Pike. And so if you're ever out in Seattle, please stop. Pike sits right on Pike Street Market. And if you ever do chance to get in there, Charles has taken and more or less made it a very beautiful museum that you can go in and see all the merchant of Vin, all the breweries that he's represented over the years in the United States, and all their old nostalgic photos. At some point in time, we've had domestic breweries in our portfolio, and so we've kind of revolved over this last 37 years. So, any other questions so far? Well, good. Out of the lineup that we have, we pick from certain regions, but also we pick based on what we can market. It all comes down to being an importer. I mean, you want to make sure that you're selling goods at a certain rate of return and to where you're able to move through in product, as opposed to just, I get questions all the time where people will call up and say, hey, can you bring in a keg of something for me? Or I found this beer over in Germany when I was in the service and I really, really love it. Can you bring a couple cases in for me? It's a little different than when it comes to an importer. I mean, an importer, such as Chad was mentioning, the thing is we look for the niche where we're wanted, and we find a place where we can actually plant our roots, and that's what we've done here in Missouri. We've planted our roots in St. Louis, Kansas City, Columbia, Springfield, and basically found our niche in accounts that we're looking for diversity. And that's really what we're looking for. And so with our portfolio, it's made up of 10 different breweries. It ranges all the way from Scotland with our Traquair. And you might notice that one on there. It's a small little Scotch ale producer. Samuel Smith is the largest. Traquair is our smallest. And then in between you have two German breweries, one Ayinger, and the other one is Pincus. Pincus is a unique one because it actually is the world's first solely organic, or certified organic brewery. The family has been brewing since 1816, but in 1981, the family decided to basically turn it over and go to certified organic beer, and making all their beer with organic hops and malt. But it was well before the time. So in 1981, the family had started making all their beer organically. And so it kind of was a kickstart to what we also do with Samuel Smith to this day. And Samuel Smith actually makes an organic line of beers that you're seeing a little more in volume. And you'll see that tonight with our organic chocolate stout. For the breweries that are doing organic in their portfolio, they're really just doing it as a commitment to what the beer, to the product, not so much as a health concern or to raise awareness to your health. It's more or less a commitment to organically produced products, or the hops and the malt and the agriculture. So, yes. Oh, so to round out the rest of the portfolio, in Belgium is where we spend a lot of our time. Belgium is unique because for a country that's so small, you have so many different styles that are coming out of there. So you have not only some of the Trappist, original Trappist provinces that are in there, but you have, we have some beautiful Saison, we have wit beer that come out of that region. We have the Lambics, of course, with Lindemans. And then we have also actually found a new producer that actually starts to make a gluten-free beer, which is kind of a unique alternative for us. But there's a unique market, people looking for beer that's made with pseudo-cereal and grains or gluten-free. And go ahead.
I want to go back to the organic thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Just because I think it's kind of fascinating. We don't really find a lot of states that are doing organic right now, honestly. And you keep seeing more come out of Europe, and it's kind of interesting. And so what you said was that it's because they want to keep the impurities out of the beer. That's the reason. It's not really for any other reason. They just want to make sure that it's clean. That's really the.
It's more or less the commitment to the
The one thing, if you look at what Pincus did, Pincus went to a commitment, and that's also a brewery that makes between 3 and 6 beers a year. Okay, to go into a brewery such as Samuel Smith that does between 27 and 30 different beers, we bring in 15. Out of that lineup, 6 of those are organically produced. So in that case, it's a commitment to what they're doing with the product line, and they're using certified USDA or UK soil certified hops, malt. In this case, we have organic apples that's used in the product, or organic fruit that they'll use to actually make the beer. And so that was their commitment. They started back in 1999 is what Sam Smith did with it. But one of the main reasons why they had done that to begin with is because they had seen what Pincus was doing years ago, all the way back to 1981, and felt that there was a uniqueness to it, especially for a brewery. In this case, you're talking about a brewery that's 250 plus years old. So you're not creating new all the time. You basically go back and you're reviving what's old. And so in this case, they took an old world recipe with most of their beer styles and turned them into organic recipes and made fresh recipes, but made organic produce. And hence, that's why we come out with the chocolate stout. So, ready for the... Who's already drank all their beer? Yes, ma'am. No. Nope. All the product is actually bottled over there, kegged, bottled, packaged, all over there, and then shipped over here to the United States. And so, yeah, we're more or less appointed. What's unique with Merchant Divin is that, like I said, we started out in '78 in just the U.S. Today, if you went on our website, we actually find us in Canada. We're in China. We're in Australia. We're in New Zealand. We're in Puerto Rico. So we've expanded ourselves out because there's people that are looking for the same breweries that we have, but in other parts of the world. And so that's where we had the ability to actually expand out and kind of spread the wealth to not only just the United States market, but to everybody else, the rest of the world. So Orval. Show of hands real quick, who's had Orval before? Small number. That's a good number. This is by far my favorite, the portfolio. This is a unique one. This is, long and short of this is what, it's a rarity for a beer like this to be produced at an actual working monastery that produces beer. Orval is one of those breweries that actually steps out on a limb and puts it all on the table and makes one beer and makes it damn well. But in turn, it's with the use of the products and what they're putting into the bottle and what the finished product comes out to be. What's unique with this is that this beer has 3 different types of malt, 4 different types of hops, uses wild Brett in the the third fermentation. So it actually goes through 3 fermentations in total in its lifetime. The beer will age up to, I've had it up as old as 18 years old. It'll age on the bottle that you were holding, that'll hold on 5 years, period. And the unique thing is that there's really no stylistic component to this. Some people will call it a Belgian pale ale. Some people will call it a golden ale. I just call it a hodgepodge. Okay, I call it a hodgepodge because over the years at the monastery, there's been more of a revolving door that people have come in with brewing experience, whether it's a brewer that came from England that's been rumored, a brewer that came in from Germany, one that came in from Hungary. All these brewers came in with brewing experience and basically lended their hat to making this beer. This beer is dry hopped, which makes it very, very unique. It goes through 3 weeks of dry hopping with about 100 kilos of those 4 different types of hops. That's rare for a beer, especially in Belgium, to go through that much dry hopping, where this is more of an English style traditional type of beer terminology or usage of producing your beer. And then in turn, to use a little bit of wild Brett in the mix as well. So what's unique is that in the first fermentation, they'll make it as a standard pale. The light-colored malts, they'll add in a standard yeast. They'll start to do its job. It'll ferment. It'll stop. And then they'll add in a secondary yeast and during the dry hopping. That'll create this finished product. And then at the third part, they'll actually add in a little bit of wild Brett. So the wild Brett is actually where it takes over in the mix. And so in the mix, during the third fermentation that's in the bottle, the wild Brett is actually going after the aroma in the beer. Creates this funky, earthy, what's the term I always like to use? Horse blanket, musty smell that comes through that affects the beer. But in turn, the finished product has a uniqueness that actually taints a little bit of the hops. So the hop bitterness is not there. But then in turn gives a little bit of fruitiness on the back note of the beer. Can you relate a little bit? Am I off? Unique thing here as I'm getting is actually it's a little bit cloudy, but you'll notice is in your beers that you have a lot of head on those beers? Huge amount of head. The tough thing with this beer is it's one of the most unmanageable beers out there. Unless you have a beautiful chalice such as the Orval chalice, which one of you might win before you go home. You'll notice that the Belgians like to put their beers in chalices. And in this case, with the monasteries, all three of them actually make this beautiful type of chalice. It's meant for a reason. It's like in my opinion, Orval, Rochefort, Westmalle, the three Trappists that we have, are almost like tightly wound Cabernets that need time to breathe, need time to aerate. And so in this case, same thing goes with pouring into our deep red wine. You want to let it breathe. Same thing goes with the opening of this beer. You want to let that beer breathe, let the carbonation flow off. And so, hence, when you pour it into small glasses, such as what you have, the downfall is that all that carbonation is going to add up and now you get a huge, thick, white, pillowy head. When you go into the Orval chalice, you would notice that basically it would start to even out. The presentation is beautiful. It's about a half-inch thick head that comes off of that, but the presentation is golden orange. So. Finishes out at about 6.9% alcohol. What's your take? IBUs. Oh, you would ask me that. Is it in your brochure? Is it? 32. Yep. Very, very, very mild. It's unique because I've been to the monastery and watched them, and I've watched them take out the tea bags, more or less, with the hops in them that they've used after 3 weeks of dry hopping. And when they say they've dry hopped it for 3 weeks, it's amazing because you would think the beer would come out intensely bitter. It's not. But it's also incorporated because of the yeast that they're using. The yeast, what's unique with Orval is that they're managing or playing with roughly about 40 plus clones of Brettanomyces. And so in that said, they're actually, they're using the best strains that they can to put into their beer, but they also monitor over that shelf life of 5 years. So.
You mentioned that they've had brewers from different countries.
Yeah.
Are the brewers monks as well?
Not so much. Not so much today. Going back, and you're talking about 50 years farther, very well could have been, because some of the literature I've read in books, one was Michael Jackson's book, is he mentioned that a rogue brewer that once was brewing basically found asylum by going and joining the monastery, becoming a monk, but also because he had brewing experience, and that's where they feel that the dry hopping came from. And so going back, yes, and probably good chance that some of them were monks on top of being brewers or brewery hands. To this day, with the monasteries, there is more emphasis on the population staying current or staying high. And so there's more people coming into the monasteries that are wanting to basically join the monastery, first and foremost, before actually working in the brewery. The brewery is just a side note that, out of this mix, out of the original 7, out of that mix, most monks are not brewers. Most of them actually, the monasteries are actually hiring brewing engineers, and those brewing engineers are accredited from Germany or from Belgium, from Leuven or from Weinstefan, to where they've actually educated, and then they've had their own hiring team that come in, and then a lot of laymen come in around from the towns that they're from to actually work in the breweries. So, but go ahead, Chet.
I just want to see whatever here, because especially the people who are fairly new to beer, this is a pretty funky beer. Like there's a funk coming up from that yeast, and I know I like a super funky saison. I like to drink a lot of heavy duty saison. So for the people that are kind of new to beer or relatively new to beer, do you guys like this, or is it a little too let's say horse blankety? Which is funny because everybody says, they say that's not just your term. They do describe these beers as horse blankety because they kind of take on what's around them. So, do you guys like this beer, or is it a little too much? Yeah, everybody really likes it. Is there anybody that just thinks it's just nasty? Yeah. Yeah, a couple people. Okay.
No shame.
Yeah.
No, that's why they make different types of beer. So, sure.
The one thing you'll find out with Orval is that you might have had it tonight. I missed the. Do you still have the bottle that was on? What's the date on the bottle when it was produced? January 14, 2014. So 12 months old, 13 months old, basically. Wow, that's oud. Okay, good. So in this case, with Orval, basically, if you're ever shopping around and you've had this beer tonight and you see it on the shelves again, look at the side of the bottle, check the date on it. The thing is, the beer will age well. What will happen is as the beer ages, the hops will dissipate a little bit, but you'll still have the complexity from the yeast strain that holds up the malt that actually sits there and still has a nice full bodiness that comes through. It does, and that's 60 months from the brew day. Yep. So yeah, 5 years. Yep. So the one thing I was going to mention is with Orval is that it's ever changing in the bottle. Now the fermentation is stopped, but what changes up is the yeast. The yeast is actually adding this different culture to it. So every batch that you see, you could buy 2 different dates off the shelf and take them home, whether it be the 2 that we just talked about, and you could take them home and time side by side, and I can guarantee you'd have complexities. Not one beer would be the same as the other. Very, very unique for a beer that, like I said, Monastery puts all their cards on the table and makes one beer, and this is it. If the monks want to drink beer, they basically add a little water to it. So they don't make a petite. Some of the monasteries will usually make a petite beer or half the percentage of alcohol, so the monks can actually have it. But in this case, this is not even the case with Orval. So a couple things to add on to the Trappist monasteries and their commitment to what they do. The monasteries, the numbers that are out there right now, even the one that's actually now in Massachusetts, that's Spencer Abbey, all the monasteries now that sit under the International Trappist Association, and you'll notice a moniker that's actually on the brochure. If it's a true Trappist product and they call it Trappist, they'll have to have that little symbol on there. But that also means that basically they sit on a board, and on that board, every one of the monasteries will sit down at a table and say, okay, I'm going to produce this much product for the next year. This brewery, other brewery is going to say, I'm going to produce this much. They all determine their production levels. Once the production is been met, they turn off the faucet. They stop brewing. Doesn't matter if they hit it 6 weeks early, 6 months early. It doesn't matter. They just stop brewing. How many breweries do that? In this case, with the monasteries, at the end of the day, after recouping the money that was needed to pay for materials, to keep the lights on at the monastery, so to speak, everything at the end of the day that's left over, that's profitable, is given away to charity. So the monastery's creed is that they don't keep any money for profit. Everything that's left over is given away to charity. So it's always been unique over my tenure with the company is that the bosses would go to Belgium and they come back from an annual meeting and they say, well, we're going to get a little more Orval. Now in general, what's funny with this is that Orval ships about 6% of their overall production to the United States. Out of that mix up, the rest of the lineup, Rochefort sends about 4% of their overall production to the United States, and Westmalle sends about 3% of their overall production to the United States. For a country as big as we are, and the consumptions that we have, every time my bosses would come back, they'd say, the brewery's going to send a little bit more to us. And we'd say, thank you, and just sell every dry we can. So that's why I say it's a rarity for us to taste the beer out. We don't do it that often, but I love the fact whenever I get a chance to pour Orval, it gives me Orval, Westmalle, or Rochefort, the Trappist that we do. It gives you a little more appreciation of what the monasteries are doing. So definitely jump into them if you haven't tried the other two before. All three of the monasteries we have, if you go on Rate Beer, I can guarantee that the lowest score out of that mix right now is 97 out of 100 points, and that's out of those 5 beers that we do from the monasteries. And so they're very well received. They're very complex. Sir.
Are you implying that monks can't drink full-strength beer? Were you saying 0.5% less or 0.5% total?
They're usually, so in this case, in comparison, Westmalle does a petite. And so petite is basically, Westmalle, the double would be around 7.5%. They make a petite, which comes in right around 3.5% to 4%. So it's half the amount of alcohol. Yep. So in this case, with Orval, they don't make a petite. And some monasteries will, because of the monks, they're not making a full-bodied beer, full to what the consumers or that are being produced or exported outside the monastery. So, all right. Cheers. We're on to Doppel. Has everybody sucked down their Dopplebock already? All right. Let me try this guy here real quick. All right. Go ahead, Jim.
Before you start talking about the Dopplebock, I want to tell everybody. The next one, don't drink all the next beer. Once you get it, if you guys are tempted to drink it, which I promise you will be because it's really delicious. Not this one, but the next one, save some of it because I want you guys to mix the last two together just a little bit so you can taste them together because they're really, really amazing together. So don't drink all your chocolate ale when you get it if he's still talking about this.
And don't drink all your raspberry by itself either. Get a chance to try both. So if anything, try them separately before you mix the two together.
Right.
So, and that's it happened to be because of this Valentine's Day week. That's why.
I pinpointed the chocolate stout and also the raspberry to mix the two together. So big hit for us, big marketing time of the year for us. But anyway, let's back up. Ayinger Brewery. This is the Inselkammer family. They are in the heart of Bavaria, about 35 kilometers southeast of Munich. They have amassed the most awards out of any Bavarian brewer as far as reputation, as far as respect, not only from the consumers but also from the media, not only in Europe but also in the United States. It's our little darling in our portfolio. Hands down, the beers are just dynamite. They're traditional. They're traditional wheat beers, Hefeweizens, Dunkel wheats. They make a beautiful Oktoberfest Märzen, which is unique for Oktoberfest, is that it's actually brewed in the traditional month of March, cellared, and then brought out or shipped over to the United States for release in the September festival. Not many breweries are doing that. People always come out, it seems to be that anymore, everybody's coming out with some type of Oktoberfest style, but if you look for that little word Märzen on the side of the bottle, or the side of on the draft list, that's key, because ultimately with Ayinger, they do everything with longevity. And so this brewery is one that will brew batches, but in turn age their beer proper amount of time, sometimes in most industry standards, too long, because you're worried about getting a product out to market as fast as possible. Not with Ayinger. Ayinger has the ability, after they built a brand new brewery back in 1999, they spent $20 million. They made a brand new state-of-the-art brewery, but it was also due to the fact that they were making the brewmaster, or the owner at that time, was approaching his mid-70s, and he wanted to pass his brewery off to his son. And so in this case, he built a $20 million brewery, and he's now handed it off to his youngest son, which is in his 30s now. And with that said, a $20 million brewery gets you basically a self-automated brewery that only requires the help of 3 brewmasters at one point. And so this brewery is state-of-the-art. It is a mix of hospitality and brewing, or you can go into, if you actually ever in Ayinger, you can actually go into the hospitality room where you would actually sit down and have a pint, but in the same time, it's actually a brewing facility during the week, Monday through Friday. It's very unique because they mix the two together to make it hospitable, and that's what's unique with the Inselkammer family, is that they are into the hotel business, they are into the restaurant business, and also in turn they also make beer. And so they tied them all together with having their beers paired with their foods. They are a Michelin star rated restaurant in the town of Ayinger where their brewery's at. And so, long story short, they're very, very traditional in what they do as far as the wheat beer, the lagers, whether it's golden lager, dunkel lager, Dopplebock lager, which is double dark lager. But they're very, very traditional in how they prepare their beers with their food, which is very, very traditional. In this case, who's familiar with a Dopplebock? Who's had Doppelbocks before? What would you rate them, ale or lager? Speak up. It is a lager. The reason why I throw that in there is because a lot of the times, I'll get a lot of people to say, oh, it's dark. It's an ale. Tastes funky. Rolling flavors, a little chocolate, a little bit of espresso. That's unique. That's an ale. It's forward. It's an actual lager. It is Ayinger's. Basically, it's a simple recipe for them. It is their dunkel. It's their Altbarsch dunkel recipe. Twice the amount of malt, with about 4 extra weeks of aging that's put on top of it. So Doppelbock, you'll hence, if anybody's ever seen a bottle of Ayinger Celebrator, comes with a little goat charm on it. Okay, and that's the easiest way to pick up on what Ayinger does. It has 2 goats on the bottle, on the label, and it has a little charm on the label, charm wrapped around each bottle, which is the goat. The term Doppel basically means youth or strength. Double. And Bock means youth or strength. So the Germans love to use the ram, or in this case, they have a goat on there, a mountain goat. And so, hence the term Doppelbock for them. So double the amount of malt. What the brewery will do is they'll make this beer full flavor and then age it for 12 weeks, or cold cellar it for 12 weeks, and let it sit and linger, and the mature flavors come through. And so what's unique about this beer is that you have this about 6.7% alcohol, beautiful, full-bodied, long lingering finish, a little bit of chocolate, a little bit of espresso on there, little bits of cocoa, and then it just has this nice lingering finish that kind of grabs you and pulls you in and asks you if you want a little bit more. So, what do you think? Yeah. The one thing I always have fun with this beer is that with the Celebrator, I do a lot of beer dinners, and I love to pour this one because it's perfect for braised meats, something gamey, something earthy, venison, something wild. But what's unique in the terms of when I compare it to a traditional German menu, where do you think that beer would finish on a German menu? Dessert. And they're very, very traditional. At one point in time, I remember having the brewery over, one of the brewery representatives over here, and we did a beer dinner, and they literally pulled me aside and said, why are we pouring Celebrator with a meat? Celebrator should be with chocolate, strudel, something gooey and ooey. And quite honestly, we ended up switching them at that point. So I've learned about the tradition with them, and that's very, very unique with the brewery and how they do things. But in this case, this beer being their biggest beer that they do, they finish it off at the end of the evening as more of an aperitif or with a beautiful dessert. So, well, good. Any questions on Ayinger? Chocolate. Everybody got a little chocolate? Everybody smelling chocolate?
Don't forget, don't drink it all.
So this is one of our newest hits. This is Samuel Smith Samuel Smith Organic Chocolate Stout. I've got oatmeal on the brain because I've been talking about it the last 2 months. That's our number one seller out of the portfolio. That's what built Samuel Smith in the United States, is oatmeal stout. To this day, it still is our number one selling beer. But that guy right there that you're trying is closely creeping in at number 2 because of the impression that it has given the public. We asked the brewery about 3 years ago to start producing a chocolate stout beer. And they said, okay. They do stouts wonderfully. The brewery actually makes 6 different stouts currently. We import 2 until we brought on this one, so now we have 3. But when we asked them to do this, they actually had never made a beer with something so vibrant and using chocolate. And so it took them a little extra time and preparation. We actually shipped over SKUs from the United States to them. We shipped over Rogue Chocolate Stout at one time, double chocolate stout over to them. We shift them examples to basically say, here's what the American brewers are doing. We think we have a home run with this. We love what's coming out of this, but also what we found out is that when they use the term organic on a product, they are focusing on not so much the malt of the beer, not so much the heaviness or the traditionality of the porters or the stouts or the pales that they're doing. They're focusing on anything that's added to it. So in this case, they've added a beautiful amount of organic cacao, all in powder, no sugars, traditional organic. So if you've ever been to Whole Foods and picked up any like cacao nibs, basically that's where you're getting. If you grind it up, put it into the batch, it's all in powder. But what's beautiful is they made a beer that has a little dustiness on it, but as yet when you drink it, it just goes down super smooth. In this case, for the different stouts that Smith does all the way up to an imperial stout, a traditional 7% imperial, dark roasted, black in color, dry stout. But in turn, they also have a very light end of the spectrum with the chocolate. And so this is their attempt at making a chocolate stout. How do you think they did? Yeah? Sure. Within reason. Most of the Samuel Smith beers that we bring to the United States have a longevity of 15 to 18 months. So really, quite honestly, they're meant to be drank now. If you want to be, specific, some of the beers will age, but in turn, it's about what you like. If you want something that if you had it one time and it's too bitter and you want to let it go a little while, maybe weaken up a little bit, it's not going to get more fantastic in the bottle. It's going to start to dissipate a little bit. So,
I'm just kind of curious, for people that would never drink a chocolate beer, I'm one of those people, really. And until I had the Four Hands, I think, chocolate milk stout, I didn't like any chocolate beer I ever tasted. And this is amazing. And so is the Four Hands. So, do you guys like this? Would everybody drink this? Is there anybody that just thinks it's terrible? No? No one? So, great. I think it's awesome.
Fun. We always say we're riding the wave. We're riding the wave right now. We've actually had the organic chocolate stout in the U.S. for a little over 2 years now. We've been having a fun riding the wave. What's unique is that it adds a little more validity of what's going on with Sam Smith, brings people into what else they have for beer styles. For them, they're just making good quality beer, very well made. What's unique with Sam Smith is that the brewery is one of the few breweries that still uses stone vessels to ferment their beer in. So all of their ales are actually fermented in Yorkshire slate squares. So it's actual slate or stone that they're fermenting their beers in. They're open top fermenters. I will say, and I didn't mention this before, but if you ever have a chance, and if you're just surfing and you've got loads of time to just look on the internet, pull up our website. We've got some great videos, and if we had a screen tonight, I'd show you about 15 minutes worth of different videos, one from Orval, one from Ayinger, one from Samuel Smith, because I will say pictures are worth 1,000 words, especially when you're talking about a brewery that's 57 years old. And the fact that they're using these Yorkshire slate squares that they brew with. It's a very costly endeavor for them to actually use to ferment in stone, but it's just something they've been doing for many, many years, so why change? Well, what they've found out is that use to the stone, and it actually gives a little more roundedness to the darker beers that they do. So the nut brown ales, the Taddy Porters, the oatmeal stouts, the chocolate stout, all those darker, maltier beers, they have this beautiful uniqueness, and also this fact that Smith uses and has cultivated their own yeast strain over the years, and so it gives it a little bit of this traditional characteristic that matches up and pairs perfectly with the use of using these stone fermentation vessels. So, Chuck?
This is Sam Smith. I think I would safely say is the one beer that we carry here that we probably, the one thing we should be selling more of, and honestly, for some reason, especially with all the craft beer and everything else, it's kind of stalled a little bit, and we carry the stout, the Taddy Porter, the nut brown, the strawberry, and now the chocolate. So we have a lot of their beer, and it's all really amazing. And I think that some people have just forgotten about some of the classics, and so I would say to spend a little bit of time going after some of the classic beers, classic breweries, and don't just put all your time into the latest and greatest brand new thing that just came out yesterday, because that is where I know most people are. I can tell by what we sell. But don't forget about all this other stuff, because it's just amazing.
He's got a very good point. I mean, the thing is, you know, I was convinced when I came to work with this company because ultimately I tried
stuff that was in the bottle. And this was, you know, back 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I tried it, I thought, wow, this was also 15 years before the craft beer explosion even hit. And so to this day, we find this relevancy. But the fact is that people or brewers or people that have gotten into the beer business somewhere started and basically opened the doors, just like Chad was mentioning, the fact that they brought beers in that basically supported it because there wasn't a lot going on at the time. But what's unique, though, is what we feel in our portfolio and that brochure that you have is there's what we call staples. There's something you can always go back to. If you're saying, you know what, I'm over hopped, I'm over malted, I'm over IBU'd, I'm too much alcohol in the palate, I need to refrain, I need to retrain my palate, go back to the basics. That portfolio has perfect basics in there. You want a classically brewed Hefeweizen, you want a classically brewed pale ale from England. And the thing is there's something in that portfolio that you can go back to, and I can pretty much, won't steer you wrong, you'll find a good classic example of what you have. And then build up from there. And that's the nice thing. I love to try everything that's out in the market, but sometimes you get to the point where I'm just like, got to go back to the original, got to go back to the old reliable. And that's what we find in our portfolio. So, all right, Framboise. Thank you. All right. It's fruity, a little bit of bubble, super sweet. Might have to brush my teeth after this. But this is Lambic. This is Lindemans Lambic. This is the most popular flavor they do, which is raspberry or Framboise, which is Flemish for raspberries. What's unique about this beer, and I mentioned there's only 7 producers in Lambic, or an area of Belgium just outside of Brussels called Vliezenbeek. But it's basically the 7 producers that are making traditional Lambic. And what they're doing is they're skipping a brewing process, a part of the brewing process to make this beer. They're basically, during the brewing process, right before they kick over to start fermentation, there's a room that they actually have that's incorporated that has open louvered windows, has the cool morning air coming through, and if you can imagine a boiling point of the mash tun kicking over this hot mass of liquid cereal over into this room that is cold, cool, and 35 degrees, going from 212 degrees boiling over to 35 degrees, and ultimately what you're doing is you're creating a ball of steam that is going to this room, and this room is nice and quiet. And my analogy that I usually would teach on is that yeast is such a unique product, and I usually relate it to bears hibernating. When yeast are not eating, they're sleeping. And when it's cool and cold, similar to this room that we're talking about, you have yeast that's live in the air. The yeast are sleeping, they're dormant, they're basically just kind of hanging out. And in turn, to wake them up, give them a quick blast of warm air. Wakes them up, but in turn, the first thing when you wake up a bear or poke a bear, what's it want to do? It wants to eat. Same thing happens with yeast. When you wake up that yeast and give it a huge burst of warmth, first thing it's going to go after is, where I need to feed myself. So the yeast is looking for something. In this case, you know, the brewery is producing this beautiful batch of cereal grains in this room into this product, which is called a cool ship. The cool ship, in my interpretation, looks like a big strainer. It's a big strainer that holds all the particles, all the hops, all the malt that's left over, that coming from the tun, and then basically at the bottom of it is all the good liquid, all the gorgeous liquid that's sitting there. And it's basically, when it comes to cool down, the yeast will come down and start to eat away at the cereals that are in the wort. Okay? Most cases with brewers and the process that they're doing is that they're going to take a little sample of yeast, they're going to mix it up, they're going to cultivate it, throw it into the batch, wait a certain amount of time, and at that point the yeast, the fermentation process will start. In this case, spontaneous fermentation, which is where the brewers in Lambic region are actually skipping the process, letting Mother Nature doing it, but they're manipulating to the fact that they're confined to this room, letting the open air from the cool Belgian farm fields come in and start this process. And within about 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, the fermentation process will start, and then they basically transfer the product on like a normal batch of beer. What is unique with spontaneous fermentation, it's considered to be one of the rarest styles of beer produced because of the fact that you're skipping this process. You're waiting for Mother Nature to do its course. But in turn, you are manipulating to some extent, but you're waiting for that process to happen. That's what happens in this. But what's unique with this is that the finished product is sweet, it's bubbly, tastes good. I can drink more, and it's very low in alcohol. What's unique though is this beer took 15 to 18 months to make. Okay, and that's what people don't realize with Lambics. Lambics is actually the wort or the actual finished product is a blend of young and old wheat beer. Okay, and so it's a sour wheat beer based on the yeast they're using, but also in turn they're blending young and old wheat beer to come up with a cuvee. And so in this case, 15 to 18 months old, and then in the process, what they're doing is they're either going to add cherries, sour or sweet, raspberries, sour or sweet, or some type of fruit to the mix. The reason why this beer is so sweet for us, we're Americans. We love sweet, hence the chocolate we just had. When Lindemans first brought this beer over to the United States, it came over sour. And we brought it over, and basically in about 2 years flat, they sent the beer home packing with the Lindemans and said, you know what, take that stuff back home, it's too sour, it's not sweet enough, we need it sweeter. And hence they reformulated it, made it special for the US market, and hence this is what we have here. Very low in alcohol, go ahead. The trends there are starting to go to where they're going to this standard, but there's also, it's supported by both. This is more of the mainstream, this is what most people would try. But if you also look at what's going on in the Lambic producers, there are also aged sours with aged cherries, and it's a beautiful representation, especially people that are getting into sours. And so you have both ends of the spectrum. This one still does command majority of the volume or growth because this is more appealing, but it's also more compatible with food, with desserts, with what you're trying to come across. You could. Sure. Yeah. So in turn, Lindemans has pretty much put all their eggs in one basket. They do make some sours. We actually do a sour that's in the portfolio called Cuvée Rennais. But what that is it's the total end of the spectrum. It's traditional Belgian Goose. So Belgian Goose is basically older aged, about 4.5 years of base in that beer, no seasoning whatsoever. So if anybody's looking for a beautiful sour expression of a traditional Goose, Lindemans Cuvée Rennais is no seasoning on it whatsoever, aged on oak barrels for about 4.5 years, and then blended in to come out with this beautiful sour beer. This beer, what's in turn though, is basically the finished product is bubbly, goes through 2 fermentations, very low in alcohol, roughly about 3% alcohol, but very, very easy to drink and very full flavor. Sorry about it.
How many people like this? Are there a lot of people in this room that have never tasted this before and are really surprised at what they tasted? I know I personally have won a lot of bar bets with this beer because I have people that come in here and I'm like, they say, I don't like beer. I say, I will bet you I can find one single beer that you'll like. And I always give them this beer, and they're like, this isn't a beer. So this is beer. So it's people say they don't like beer, get one of these, and I promise you, you'll win the bet. So we've had this on draft for about 15 years. We have it on draft. We've had it for a long time. We sell a lot of it. Excuse me. And we also have the peach version of this in a bottle. We've had that for a long time as well, so I recommend that you guys try that. Are there any other questions before we ask a few trivia questions for Yes? You said you were going to mix it. Well, I didn't say that. I said you're going to mix it. However, if you go out to the bar out front, you can buy one. It'll be 12 ounces of chocolate and 3 ounces of framboise. Is that the best ratio? Well, I tested it for them today. I would say
75-25. 75 chocolate, 25. Sir?